The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, live on the DraftKings YouTube channel and the Pat Mayo Experience Facebook. Now that I've hit the button, it's definitely up there now. All right, let's recap Week 6 in the NFL. Talk about the waiver wire upcoming for Week 7. Not a ton going on the waiver wire, but some good streams both at defense and at quarterback. Plus, we'll preview the Monday night game and look forward a little bit into Week 7 and maybe adjust to some of these early spreads, plus recapping the entire injury report from the NFL and how that affects your fantasy roster going forward. Sal Vetri will be joining me here in just a second, but first, I do want to let you know some things like number one, smash the like button for this episode. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Let me know how much fab you would use on the waiver wire and who you would pick up this week, because there's a case to be made for some guys, not to spend all of your budget or anything like that, but there's some good players out there. There are no great players currently available on the waiver wire, so I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say out there. My article right now with the rankings and the injuries is up on dkplaybook.com. You can find it in the description or comment section of this podcast and video. That's a living document. It gets updated when injuries occur, so I'll update it again after Monday Night Football and again before I do the rankings on Tuesday, and I'll touch it up a little bit if something big happens with Jake Seeley on Tuesday's show before we get into the rankings, like I do every single week. If you're looking for the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League, I do not have the link to that yet, so once that becomes available, I'll go back and add it the moment I get it, so you can go reserve your spot. Best tournament on DraftKings, by the way. $15 to enter, 3 max entry, no rake whatsoever. So more bang for your buck in the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League on DraftKings than any other tournament on DraftKings. Let's bring him in right now. Sal Vetri from the Sal Vetri YouTube channel, which everyone should definitely go subscribe to right now. What's going on, my man?
How's it going, Pat? Yeah, I'm excited to be here again. We're like to the point of the season where we can maybe start to make some more rasher assumptions. It's crazy because the NFL is just, the storyline's changed so quick. A month ago, Dallas looked like the best team in the league, and now we're wondering if they're even a good football team. So excited to break it down 6 weeks through the NFL season. Yeah,
so we'll get to our power rankings of the teams here in a second. Plus, I have a new MVP watch that we can kind of go over and talk a little bit about what happened to us in terms of fantasy, in terms of betting and everything like that, and DraftKings play from Week 6. But I do want to announce the winners from the giveaways from last week. So credited $20 DK into your account. I don't know if that's done yet, but it will be soon. A. Moorman, Big Berm, B. Patterson 40, Eli _Montana 10, Monroe, Da Kitty, iMart1313, Zanzir Golden, UT Quillen, K Rich 25, Lockport 3121, and Venom _Do. I don't know if I'd put an underscore in my DraftKings handle. It seems like something I would forget constantly. But hey, here we are. How'd you do on DraftKings last week? Because I actually did okay. I ended up playing 3 lineups. I played a bunch of 3 maxes, single entries, and 2 of the lineups did really well. That one Kyler Murray lineup that had Le'Veon Bell in it for me did not do so hot, but the other ones were pretty good.
Yeah. We were talking right before the show started. This was probably one of my worser weeks, I guess you can say. I'm somebody who plays, you touched on 3 maxes and single entries a lot, and I'm pulling up lineups right now, actually. So I had 2/3 out of all my 3 maxes pretty much with Le'Veon Bell, so that's something that took a huge hit. Zeke Elliott, the one lineup that didn't have him, really prop that one up. But yeah, it was a week where there's a lot of, I guess you could say, chalkier or expected wide receivers that just don't come through. Being high on DeAndre Hopkins and Tyreek coming through. DeAndre Hopkins, watching him drop a touchdown pass, it was brutal. That was something that was a big difference in the week. So probably one of my worst. I have to check with week 1, but probably one of my worst weeks yet. But I was actually experimenting with like 150 maxes, just getting some help from some other people in the industry that I met. And I think next week in the lower stakes, I'm going to try and test out some of these 150 max, like dollar entries, and just really mess around with it a little bit more.
Yeah, I know that's something that I did. I tried to revamp my entire golf game at one point, and I was kind of like treading a lot of water. I was slightly losing a bit every single week. And I started to think, should I be playing either 20 entries or 50 entries or 150 entries? And there's a 50-cent mini max where you can enter 150 entries. And it's good. Like, I mean, yes, it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you $75 if you want to max enter it. But it's a good way to figure out if something like that is for you instead of having to invest, into the Millionaire Maker. The Millionaire Maker is only $10 this week, but you can invest $75 or potentially even less if there's a 25-cent one. And sometimes there are 10-cent ones that you can do this into. It's a great way to go learn before you have to go invest $1,500 into the Millionaire Maker and try to do something like that. So I highly recommend that everyone go do that too. And if you check the description of the video or podcast, the guys from Daily Roto, Drew and Mike, just talk through a lot of the strategy, even if it's single entry 3 max or 150 max and playing that many lineups. That entire strategy video is in there. I learned a ton from it in the preseason. I know that people have been doing really well with it so far, and just using the Daily Roto tools overall has really helped me so far in this DraftKings season. I've had a few bad weeks. I've had a couple good weeks. I'm probably coming off my best week right now. Cooper Kupp kind of buried me a little bit in my main lineup, but having Cherry Terry McLaurin in there, scoring McLaurin coming through, and some AP action. And without even playing Case Keenum, it was kind of weird, but I was just like, I independentally like these two guys, and I think they're the only two that are going to do anything, and boom, all of a sudden it just kind of works out. So if you go to dailyroto.com and use the promo code THEPME, you'll get yourself 10% off. They have an optimizer, they have all the tools, and just, it's hard to hand make 150 lineups, so using their optimizer and lineup generator is a tool that I really do try to take advantage of when I decide that I really want to leap in. It's funny, Sal, I had a terrible picks week against the spread, but I did the Sunday live show, and I was like, I'm not even going to bet a spread on Sunday. Just like, I have no feel for this board whatsoever. And I'm going to give myself a quick Barry Horowitz here. Just a quick back pat, and just to not have the temptation of being like, you know what, I have to bet on this slate. I want some action on the games. I was like, you know what, I'll just play some props. The props turned out great. I gave up the 3 solos and the parlay, all 3 hit. So winning week from the betting side, but in your picks pool, if you tailed me, you did fucking awful. Did you bet anything on the weekend, or were you just kind of sitting back and playing DraftKings?
Yeah, I was just playing DraftKings. I have some stuff down for the Monday night game tonight. I have 2 player props, and then I have just an over-under pick on that. But yeah, I was somebody who probably last year was the last big year that I was just doing some of the sports line betting and trying to open up and get into the earlier spreads when they came out and things like that. And I was just terrible at it. It's a really tight industry, and I want to get it more into our tight market. I really want to get into more of the player prop side, because that's exactly where the books know they're terrible if they're putting such low caps on it. So yeah, player props is somewhere I want to look more into, and just trying for being in the States and North Carolina, which is one of the slower ones to move at it being legal here to sports bet, just trying to find places that makes the most sense to get action down on these props. Yeah,
it's tough to do in some of these states where it hasn't been quite legalized. It's even difficult to see the odds if you live in one of these states, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the biggest problem for me. I have 2 friends, and I mean, I'm from Pennsylvania. I have 2 friends that are in that area right now, and I'm in a group chat with them. They're always sending props and lines and stuff, and that's really how I know some of the updated stuff. I mean, I could check on some of the Bovadas and whatever other DK Sportsbook and all that, but trying to find somewhere where I can actually get action down here, it's impossible.
So let's do one thing I want to start doing here just a little bit, but I always forget every single week is the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League. I talk about it all the time, rake free. Everyone should go join it once that link is posted. I cashed 2 of my 3 teams in it, and one of the things that I don't have a whole lot of control over the tournament, one of the things for golf and football that I really wanted to hammer down on is that if you finished inside of the money, that you win at least double. I played in a couple of the $33 5 max ones, and I cashed 2 lineups, and I lost money in the tournament. And I was like, oh, well, I didn't lose money in the tournament, but I cashed 2 lineups in the 33, so I was in for 99. I think I ended up getting back 107 or something like that, because they were basically min cashes. So I really wanted to make an emphasis that if you cash, you win at least double your money. Having no rake in the tournament really goes a long way to allowing that. But the winning lineup from this week, I can't believe it has Mark Ingram in it. That gets me so low, especially when you probably could have had Chris Carson for the same price right around there. Oh, he did have Chris Carson too. Anyway, Matt Ryan was the quarterback. Chris Carson, Mark Ingram, Stefan Diggs. You probably needed Diggs if you were going to win this week. Scoring McLaurin, Tyler Lockett. Oh, this could have been an even bigger week considering Lockett had that touchdown called back at the end, but I guess Carson ended up getting in, so it was a bit of a wash. Austin Hooper, Mohamed Sanu, and Broncos D. It's funny, Sal, after last week when you needed 300 points to end up winning, 224 is an easy winner here. It won by 3 points.
Yeah, I have the Millie Maker lineup too. It was 240 won the Millie Maker this week, and it's a lineup that it doesn't even seem that crazy to actually go out and build compared to what weeks past, especially last week, like you were saying, over 100 points more scored in the Millie Maker.
It's just funny. I think Sanu, I didn't end up doing I played 2 Kyler teams, and I ended up playing a Mahomes team. And I thought, like, I was brilliant with my Mahomes call through, like, a quarter. And then it didn't really work out so hot. But Kyler was all right. I really wish I had stuck to my guns with Kirk Cousins. I was big on him, and I just kind of ran out of time. I was going to end up playing, like, 10 lineups or 20 lineups. I made the 3, and I was like, yeah, I got stuff to do. It's Canadian Thanksgiving. We're here working on a holiday. It's a family day. Had to go hang out with the fam jam. We got the father-in-law in town. We got the baby walking around. Sometimes this stuff kind of gets in the way. So I do the show. I go race to do that, and I'm trying to watch all the games at once. And now the one week when I'm just big on Kirk Cousins, playing Kirk Cousins stacks, don't do it like an idiot, despite talking about it with Davis on the show. I feel like a fucking moron. But either way, this is a pretty good lineup. I mean, Mark Ingram should probably be disqualified. So I think this guy may need to give his money back. I think I'm going to have to try to make that a rule with DraftKings, that if you use Mark Ingram, you instantly come in last place in the Pat Mayo Experience Tournament. You just have to give your money away. But congratulations to Cristo 33. That is a highly impressive lineup. Kyler Murray and David Johnson, Miles Sanders were the 1, 2, 3 for the second place lineup. So it all kind of worked out really well. Demir Bird in that lineup too. Hey? Get yourself some savings with one big catch at 0.1% ownership. You're good to go. So I thought, now that we're into week 7, frankly, Sal, that a lot of people have checked out of fantasy football. If you're still doing well, you know who's up on the waiver wire. So we'll get to that in a second. We don't need to go super deep on it. But I want to kind of frame our discussion of the recap just a little bit. I made some notes, just kind of one-liners about some of these games of stuff that I really noticed. But I wanted to start with MVP watch. So I kind of wanted to get your insight on this. So I have Russell Wilson right now. If you were to name the MVP today, I think the MVP is Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have, right when I heard you say the MVP watch stuff, I just started thinking about it. And yeah, Russell Wilson to me would be that guy so far through the season. And it's kind of crazy how he's doing it, because last year he was just so efficient in terms of his touchdown percentage. And once again, he's leading the league in that department, and he hasn't fallen off that much. It was somewhere in the mid 8% in terms of how often he was throwing a touchdown pass. And now it's like 7.7%. So he's just still so highly effective. And when you think about it, like the weapons around him, he's making Tyler Lockett into a true number 1 wide receiver, and he's dealing with just poor offensive line play, and a lot of that's due to injuries. So, yeah, he's been fantastic on just what is limited pass attempts for a team that, if they get ahead, will run the ball a lot.
So after that, it gets kind of dicey, because I don't think, like, Mahomes is dealing with this injury, but obviously you have to hold that against him if we were to give it out today. Then I went Wilson, Watson, Mahomes, McCaffrey. Then I have Lamar Jackson, I guess. Is there someone I'm, like, obviously missing from that list?
No, I mean, no, I don't think so. I would have had, I was going to say, where do you think McCaffrey comes in on that? We know running backs, for the most part, kind of get the short end of the stick when it comes to MVP odds, but he's literally been just carrying that team. So, yeah, I would have McCaffrey high up there. Watson is somebody who comes to mind with Mahomes as sort of rounding out like a top 4. After that, I'm not really sure, because you have Aaron Rodgers, a guy who's always going to be getting MVP in terms of odds hype, but hasn't done much this season. The way that they're using him is just not to do much. He's being kind of turned into, quote unquote, a game manager a little bit more. It's not much. First 3 weeks, I would have said Dak Prescott, maybe Jimmy G, just because he's at the helm of a 5-0 team, but not much right now. Tom Brady, I guess, is somebody who always comes up, but that's why it seems like Wilson's on like a tier of his own right now, because nobody else is really separating themselves from the pack. I would probably put Lamar up there, because, again, second 100-yard rushing day, he had like 100 yards on the ground at halftime, and doing it without Hollywood Brown and doing it with really limited weapons, if you actually think about it, in Baltimore, forward is now a 4-2 team. Yeah, it seems like it's Russell Wilson and maybe Patrick Mahomes on that same tier, and then it drops off a little bit.
Yeah, I would even throw Deshaun Watson into that mix too. Lamar, I just put at number 5 because of the stats that once we look at them at the end of the year, and even looking at them right now, it's like, oh my God, like this is an incredible year. But I don't think that he actually has a realistic shot of winning the MVP unless the Ravens roll off a bunch of quality wins instead of like losing to average to good teams and just beating up on all the crappy teams. That there's going to be sort of a line of demarcation there. McCaffrey is probably not going to win unless he like averages 200 yards a game or something crazy like that. And again, against both, just don't play receivers or running backs against San Francisco. And if it's McCaffrey and he can fall into the end zone and they can do things in the receiving game, play them against Tampa. They are not a receiving running back. Do not play running backs against Tampa. Those are 2 things to take away, at least for the near future going forward for fantasy. But the actual odds on the MVP right now, Mahomes is still the favorite at plus 220. Russell Wilson is second at plus 225. Deshaun is 6-1. McCaffrey is 9-1. And then you kind of hit it on the head. Name value goes a long way once we talk about something like the MVP, as Rodgers and Tom Brady are next, both at 14-1. I don't think either one of those guys has done anything to be in the MVP discussion.
No, I don't either. I think Brady, there's like half of all of his games so far, there's just moments where he looks like a 42-year-old quarterback out there. And Rodgers, he even came out and said it. He's like, I don't want to be putting up, or I don't need to put up the statistics anymore after that last win. He just said, I just want to win games now. And the way that they're using him and really LaFleur coming over from Tennessee wanted to be run first. I have no idea why, but the way that they're using it, that's just going to kind of hammer the ceiling on what an MVP season can look like for Rodgers. I guess like naming somebody else, Carson Wentz a little bit, but when you're playing on a team that's not performing as well, especially with those expectations, it's not great. But when you look at Wentz in terms of like efficiency numbers, he's been good and he's dealing with a lot of injuries there, but nowhere near some of those top 3-4 names that you said, especially the quarterbacks.
And I guess you mentioned Jimmy G. He comes in at 20-1, and that kind of gets me into these like single takeaways that I wanted to talk about in terms of a recap. I have a bunch on Garoppolo and just stuff. That's the one real. I watched like some of the quick like 5 to 8 minutes just rewatching all the games. I went back and watched like every single play in its full from that game this morning because it was kind of on. I was watching. I was like, what the hell is going on in this game? So I really wanted to give it a second look. There are a few things that I really noticed. That Jimmy G hasn't looked very good so far. He is doing exactly what he needs to do. He's throwing a ton of screen passes, just very high percentage, high efficiency passes. That's really good. He's not really asking... Kyle Shanahan is not asking him to throw the ball downfield. We haven't really seen the 49ers trail yet, and I thought that's what would happen in this Rams game, especially with the 2 tackle injuries to the 49ers, that the Rams would get a bunch of pressure, but Kyle Shanahan did a really good job of scheming that away with these short passes, and even if you look at some of the long receptions, whether it be someone like George Kittle or even Pettis, you hit one guy on a slant and he takes it 25 yards. It's not like he's finding people down the field. I've seen him do it before. I just haven't really seen much of it this season as it pertains to Jimmy Garoppolo. But it's really weird things. Like there was one play in the game, he ended up taking a sack on it, but it was a very clear offside from the defense. It was a free play. And we saw how Patrick Mahomes took advantage of this against the Texans. We see Tom Brady do it. We see Aaron Rodgers do this like basically twice a week at some point. Like just the lack of awareness of knowing that, hey, like I don't need to sit here and take the sack, even if I'm running. Just why not just chuck it up to the middle of the field, knowing that this is going to be a free play for me? I just thought that the lack of awareness from Jimmy Garoppolo is really strange. And I think that's what separates him from being a truly elite quarterback. Like Brady is getting by with diminished skills right now because of what he can do with the line of scrimmage. He can identify the defense. He can change the play when necessary. But just being that next level of football understanding that he has, Drew Brees has it. Mahomes seems to have it. It's just he's dealing right now with his physical capabilities are not living up to what he's normally able to do. And I think he's really struggling with that. And we're seeing that affect the Chiefs offense. So once that ankle heals, if he does get a chance to heal, maybe he needs a week off. I don't know. That he's another one of these guys that can do it. Jimmy G doesn't actually seem to have that right now. Like there's a lack of awareness on the offense in his part. Just the offense is designed so well that it's really working. It's a lot like he's better than Goff, but it's a lot like what we've seen from Goff probably over the past 10 games.
Yeah, I think that's the spot because I was saying earlier how looking for like the weaknesses of this team, offensive line play a little bit due to injuries right now, but that's going to shore up when they get healthy. And then, Jimmy G might actually be the weakness because they have so much talent everywhere else. And this defense is just absolutely ridiculous in terms of how stout they are. Holding Jared Goff, who hasn't had a great year, but below 80 yards in passing is just unreal all around what they're doing. But Jimmy G, we mentioned it, the terrible interception in the end zone doesn't look good. And I think a big part of it is you're saying they're not trailing yet. They haven't trailed in any of these games. Their closest game was a 4-point difference where they won against the Steelers. They're probably not going to trail against Washington this upcoming weekend. I want to see how Jimmy G and the offense plays from behind. You know that they have Kittle out there, but in terms of a threat on the outside, Pettis seems like he's slowly becoming that. But can they play from behind and kind of get into a shootout and win that type of environment? It doesn't seem like they need to because of their defense, but I guess that's the point of they're 5-0. What can we kind of pick apart at them? It would be how do they play from behind a little bit? And then it would also be like what's propelling them upwards is their talent. And it might be that right now he's getting a little bit of an elevation and a boost from just some of the best offensive play calling in the league in his corner right now.
Yeah, it strikes me as strange. Is like we've seen Jimmy G a few times like this, that he's, unless they can effectively run the ball, which they have done inside of the red zone, that they're going to be very effective doing that, and it's a part of their game plan. But he himself has been very poor on short fields, and so far this season, Tom Brady has been really poor at short fields and actually dropping back and throwing the ball. I wonder if this is like a product of the one thing that New England doesn't practice is like throwing the ball from the 10-yard line. It just seems strange that, and maybe it's because we have such a microscope on these two because they're the only two undefeated teams left, that it just seems strange that these two teams would struggle so much passing the ball inside of 10 yards.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the Burkhead injury for New England specifically hurts a little bit there, and getting Edelman back is going to surely help that a little bit. But yeah, that's actually an interesting narrative there. The two teams that are struggling the most in that, coming from the same family tree, I guess you can say.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, you mentioned that he threw the pick in the short field. He just kind of threw it to Roby right in the end zone, like right to him. It was kind of strange. And then there was another like just horrible pass he made in the game. The Rams just dropped. Like sometimes those are things that get overlooked because they don't actually show up on the stat sheet. That's why I like going back and watching these games, even if it's like the abbreviated version, but you see every play. I mean, let's be real here. It doesn't take, you watch a game on TV, it takes 3 hours. If you watch like the entire thing and just play by play, second per second as it runs off the clock, it's going to take you a quick 60 minutes. If it gets edited down, maybe 50, but you can actually watch all of the plays in like 7 minutes. Where do you do that at? I'm in Canada, so I have access to that through DAZN because they're the rights holders in Canada. But people were looking for that in America to go back and watch these condensed games. Where do you find that at?
Yeah, so I mean, you can just get it on YouTube. NFL posts them to their YouTube channels. I then like go in, like you were saying, the play-by-play stuff on specific players, like if they had a good game or they had a poor game, really, and seeing what happened and watching all their plays. But yeah, you have and I personally do this every morning on Mondays, like today in the morning. I just go back and I look at all the games on YouTube. NFL posts each of them. It's like a 10-minute clip more times than not. And you could put it on just 2x speed. It might be a little bit fast, but you get them down in like 5 minutes. The way that they edit them. And pretty much what you're getting there is you're getting filtered out of all the 2-yard runs that don't matter, all the incompletions that don't have a penalty attached to them or an injury. And then you're getting to see any play that matters. It could be a 7-yard run. They'll show you it, and any type of injury penalty. So you see everything that's meaningful in honestly like 4 to 5, 6 minutes if you're putting it on 2x speed.
Yeah, watching it on 2X is something that I kind of try to take advantage of, too. I do like to, if I have the time, I like to go back, because Monday morning's pretty compressed. We're doing content, and just to go back and watch every single game that happened, even if you watch it at 2X and it's a 45-minute feed, it's going to take up, basically you have to wake up at 5 a.m. just to finish all the games and come in and watch. So you want it to be like an add-on, but I did want to watch this one back very intensely just to watch some of these incompletions and stuff that maybe you just don't end up picking up. The one thing that I really like, I thought Kyle Shanahan called an incredible game here. And I think the best play call, and something that we haven't really seen from Jimmy G so far this season because he hasn't been asked to do it. In the positive for him, they ran this 4th and 1 like QB rollout, but like back with a dive up the middle. I thought it was a really great play design. And we haven't seen Jimmy G really use his mobility all that much yet, and that could be another level of this offense to take it to the next level. Like, I talked with Cust and Jeff about Brady last week, where it seems like the Patriots are using 50% of their playbook. Like, they're saving all their good plays for January. And it seems like the Kyle Shanahan 49ers offense does have this, like, secret playbook that they can go to in a pinch. So I'm very curious to see if that ever gets broken out.
Yeah. I saw the exact same play that you're talking about with Jimmy G just kind of diving forward. And then I also thought from the 49ers, something that was interesting, snap counts for Dante Pettis hit above 70%, the most for any wide receiver since week 1, by far the most for him. And he's probably, I mean, they have talented players everywhere, but he's probably the one person that they really just haven't unleashed for whatever reason right now. Maybe we don't know exactly why, but if he continues to play 70+% of the snaps, they're going to have a true just deep threat type play. And he's a guy who in the middle of the field was making impressive catches. And when I was watching the game last week and also this week, I couldn't help but remember. I remember last week on the show, you said you were going to bet the 27-yard prop or whatever, and then you had it, and then he fumbled it away, dropped it away, whatever it was. But yeah, I think Pettis is a big key to kind of this offense moving forward. It's an offense that has a ton of talent around it, and like you said, I mean, Shanahan in his corner, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why. Obviously, the defense is a huge part of it, but Shanahan's just saying, you know what, I'm not going to play 3 wide receivers 70-80% of the time. We have 5 guys here that all have talent, and we have mismatches. We're going to use them.
So from the other side of the ball, the only real takeaway I had for the Rams is that the quarterback is Goffel. Like, he is just horrendous. And it's not even that he's bad under pressure. We know he's bad under pressure, but even when they got him on the move and got him away from all this pressure, he was throwing like bounce passes. He was throwing the ball like 30 feet over people's heads, like, and trying to throw it to them. It was a real, like, I would be very concerned if I was a Rams fan, put it that way.
Yeah, if your coach is Sean McVay, no matter how good the defense is, you're going to get plays schemed open, like receivers at least schemed open to having a chance at a jump ball or just any type of pass that'll be a high percentage completion pass. Yeah, like you said, he's throwing into the dirt. Now, Goff, like the pluses on him last year was when he misses, he'll miss low, so it's not going to be a pick or anything that can get deflected. But now he's just missing very low, and it's like just skipping to every single pass that he's just missing on right now. But yeah, it seems like he's very timid in the pocket. We know that he's not great under pressure, but now it seems like it's just affecting him on every single play. The only other major takeaway that I took away from the Rams was you finally got to see an extended look, I guess you can say, since the preseason of Darrell Henderson Jr., the rookie running back they drafted. Played only about like 30% of the snaps or so, but he definitely looked better than Malcolm Brown out there, at least from an explosiveness standpoint. That's why they drafted him. Just has that explosive ability like they were hoping to continue to have out of Todd Gurley and really just be kind of a change of pace back. So we'll see if that is anything moving forward. It seems like Todd Gurley, this injury of his, it might actually limit him coming this week as well.
Yeah, Malcolm Brown played 68% of the snaps against the Niners. Henderson played 32% of the snaps. And I agree with you. Henderson did look better in his limited work. Although it's funny, they were so effective running the ball with Malcolm Brown on the very first drive of the game. Goff didn't throw his first pass until 2 minutes left in the first quarter, which is kind of nuts to think about. But like even the Robert Woods touchdown at the beginning was just a reverse. It's kind of a strange situation. Like, if Gurley is healthy, do you think that we do see more Henderson? Because I was shocked we didn't see him in the first place, that it might just go back to being Gurley for most of the time. If he's a bit banged up or if he's a bit hampered, then they just go back to Malcolm Brown again. I'm very confused about how this backfield might work going forward once Gurley returns.
Yeah, I think if Gurley returns, that he'll probably see the far majority of it. If he is indeed fully healthy, they give him the amount of time that needs to heal from this. But I mean, I'm somebody who was pretty just involved during the preseason, and it seemed like Henderson was the guy that should have gotten the job, at least the backup job over Malcolm Brown. I don't know if it's just something that we're not seeing there, obviously not in the locker room, but just performance-wise in preseason work, Henderson was looking fine. He was looking explosive, exactly what they wanted. Everything out of camp was good sentiment. That's why he was being drafted in fantasy in like season longs, like 6th round. I feel bad for some of those people right now that have to endure that, but yeah, it's a spot where I think Todd Gurley continues to get the bulk of the workload. But if like Gurley's out next week, like I already picked up or have waivers in for Darrell Henderson Jr. right now because I want to have a piece of that. We saw the explosiveness that he had, and Malcolm Brown was on the first drive. You said it, yeah, like 7, 8, 9 yard runs. But then after that, he was just running into a wall of 49ers defenders. Couldn't make anybody miss.
Question from the chat here: who's in more trouble, the Rams or the Cowboys? Strangely, I think the Rams are a better team than the Cowboys and probably have the most upside moving forward. But I do think that the Rams are in the most trouble solely because they play in the NFC West, and Seattle and the Niners are both kind of running away with it right now, that they have to not only beat those teams to catch up, but hope that they come back to the pack a little bit. Where at least in the NFC East, you know, the Cowboys are dealing with Philly and the Giants, and like none of those teams are particularly great. They're all like kind of average to slightly above average. They all have massive deficiencies that I think Dallas can climb themselves out of their hole a whole lot easier than the Rams can.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's actually a really good point to look at it as we like focus in fantasy, not really from the real life impact of playoffs, but that's definitely a great point on it. But then also just from like the way that players are, the key pieces that you need to play. For fantasy reasons, everybody's getting down on Zeke, but anytime he's touching the ball, he's highly effective. Dak has been highly effective. The Cowboys are mainly just being limited from injuries. We saw Dak running for his life this whole past weekend, 2 offensive linemen out. We saw Amari Cooper go down. They saw 2 more defensive backs go down. Like, they're dealing with a lot of injuries and need to get healthy in a division that you said it's just very winnable right now. Whereas, yeah, it seems like your quarterback is your biggest concern right now, and that's not great. So for the Cowboys, Dak seems fine. Zeke seems fine. They just need to get healthier in an easy division. And yeah, Rams are definitely.
Yeah, well, Darnold coming back really put some life, at least into Robbie Anderson, this Jets offense, and Jamison Crowder. He has a really, after the Patriots this week, they have a really easy schedule coming up to a potential streamer. I'd still prefer Josh Allen because he has like equally as an easy as in his schedule upcoming. It's the Dolphins twice in the next 4 weeks, plus he runs and he rushes in touchdowns. He's just a better fantasy player. So I prefer Josh Allen over Safe Space Sam. But it's not like I thought that the Jets looked particularly great or anything. The Cowboys just looked awful. And like, it was the epitome of the game. And the only note that I really have here, besides like the injuries and everything like you brought up, is the Cowboys ran a pitch to Ezekiel Elliott on 3rd and 11. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, that's not great. I remember I saw somebody tweet something about like Tony Romo, which is just ironic itself, just taking a stab at Jason Garrett as something having footprints over the offense right there. Yeah, I don't know what that play call is, 3rd and 11, a huge run like that, but it was actually good, at least in my opinion, to see Zeke that involved. It was like a lack of weapons at some point when you have Cedric Wilson being the guy who needs to make your contested catches, or yeah, it's just not great.
Yeah, when you're running, when they cover Michael Gallup, and it's like, oh God, we have Cedric Wilson and Tavon Austin as our receivers. This isn't good. They couldn't even activate Devin Smith for a revenge game against the Jets, and somehow the Cowboys still almost got back in that game and forced it to go to overtime. Like the settling for field goals when just go for it at some point. This kind of happened in the Browns game against Seattle as well, where like sort of the main reasoning that they ended up being 4th and 1. And they didn't end up getting it, although it seemed like they scored twice. I really wanted that Nick Chubb touchdown. But they end up pinning. They know they're getting immense pressure on Seattle. The offensive line isn't really holding up. Russ is just doing his magic ability to elude defenders, but the Cleveland defensive line is just generating a ton of pressure in the backfield. What's really the downside? I mean, there's the downside of not getting the 3 points, but pinning Seattle on their own 1 yard line. They do that. They end up tipping the punt and just getting the ball back on the Seattle 25. Then they can come down and they can try to score. Like eventually you have to trust your defense to make a stop and put them in the worst position possible. Like with the Jets offense, yeah, they had the one big hitch and go to Robbie Anderson, the longest play of the year, but you presume that's not going to happen every time you have them on their own 6 yard line.
Yeah, exactly. I think kind of the way that they're looking at it there is weighing the options. And I think that's just coaching and personnel is like a big decision part of that. But it is interesting to think about like how that game goes a little bit differently if some of those decisions are made. It's just so tough though. Like I do think, and I have like people that I'm seeing just on Twitter in terms of friends and stuff saying injuries and all of that. I do think this was like one of the most injury riddled games that I've seen for a team. Just 3 defensive backs going down and 4 members of your offense. It was just really tough. But yeah, I do agree. I think another piece of this game that was just like I was looking at it on my phone and I saw a 62-yard field goal attempt was made, and I was like, my eyes just lit up. Like that's insane.
Hey, sometimes, if you trust your kicker, you can do it from anywhere. Sometimes having that much faith in your kicker is actually detrimental to your offense when you should be going for it instead of settling for a 62-yard field goal.
Yeah, it's like you can just trust anything's going to get banked in at that point. You're going to be going on 4th and inches.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Arizona and Atlanta, the main notes that I had from this one is that Patrick Peterson is eligible to return this week. And with Atlanta, Grady Jarrett, every time that anyone tries to run the ball, like Atlanta's defense is horrible, Grady Jarrett is stopping everything in the run. It's something that you don't really notice until you kind of key down and try to watch, like, why isn't David Johnson getting a ton done on the ground in this game? You watch like Grady Jarrett tackle. He's like, I mean, he's not as good as Ndamukong Suh was at one point, but he's just like absorbing the entire run game. It's kind of crazy to see. Cincinnati game was just Auden Tate is good in traffic. Like you throw him a contested ball and he is grabbing it, snatching it out of the air. What do you think his role is going to be once AJ Green returns? Because I don't really know what it will be.
Yeah, well, what I think his role is going to be pretty much is probably just another prime. It depends on what John Ross is. It depends on what AJ Green. I really don't have faith in AJ Green coming back anytime soon. There's also contract issues that he has to come back from. He probably wants to make that linger a little bit longer. But yeah, I don't know what it will be. When you have John Ross healthy and you have AJ Green healthy, it's probably just getting bumped back down to a wide receiver 4 unless he continues to make, what was it? There was like 4 or 5 eye-popping contested catches for him in this game. And right now, at least, he's probably their best red zone target. So if anything, if he gets bumped down to a wide receiver 4, he'll probably be heavily used in the red zone because he's just taking away Eifert's role right now. Yeah,
and Eifert just looks like a shell of his former self. What other notes do I have here? Oh, more Arizona stuff. We think about the air raid and how many snaps a lot of these receivers were playing. Like even with Bird back, no Christian Kirk still, but like Keyshawn Johnson played the most snaps of any receiver on the Cardinals. It was at 81%. Then it was Fitz, and then it was Bird and Sherfield. But we're usually seeing those guys at like all at 80% plus. Yet they ended up in a very effective game for Kyler Murray, playing a lot of 2 tight end sets and a lot of 2 running back sets, which I thought was really surprising. So I guess Max Williams and Charles Clay are now integral parts of this offense. But this is one of the hardest things that I had to do this week, because I always like trying to find the other Arizona receiver to play while Christian Kirk was sitting, and I finally don't do it this week, and both Sherfield and Bird actually have like decent catches in the game. Not good enough to like actually propel you, although Damiere Byrd appeared in that second place lineup on DraftKings. But do we just want Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, Edmonds, David Johnson, those are the Cardinals that you want to have around Kyler Murray and just not worry about these other guys. Like, how many times can I hear how great Keyshawn Johnson is until he just does nothing again? You're like, oh, well, I shouldn't be playing this guy.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Like up until this week, and like my one note for Arizona was that Kyler actually tested the ball downfield a little bit more. But up until this week, you didn't see that. And you saw it, like 3 times in this game. So just the upside of those wide receivers on the outside, they're not going to have as many opportunities to go deep. So if you're getting less talented receivers on the outside, catching the same passes as more talented players like Kirk and more experienced and red zone bodies like Larry Fitzgerald, it's exactly what it is. It's Fitz. It's probably for me in the order of David Johnson, Kirk, and then Fitz in my interests. And I'm sure we'll talk about Edmonds when we get to more of the waiver stuff.
Yeah, you never really know how much Edmonds is going to play, but we will talk about him in waiver wire running back pickups. 2 more notes just from the games. Why not more Miles Sanders against the Vikings?
I think I looked at the snap counts, the one that you were posting. It's in like the 20%, right? He just gets less and less. And they said that they wanted to give Jordan Howard more of the workload, which was a little bit mind-boggling to me. But yeah, you saw he had the 2 big catches, and he's been elusive. I mean, I watched him in person at Penn State, extremely elusive. He fits the mold of sort of a Saquon Barkley can make your first man miss, especially in the passing game. That was some of his downsides, was short passing in terms of being able to catch those balls coming out of the combine and the draft. But in terms of down the field passing, wheel routes, things like that, he's highly effective. And then on the ground, it's just eye popping to see like a Boston Scott being closer to the snaps that he had compared to Jordan Howard.
Yeah, you can find the entire Week 6 running back snap shares up on my Instagram feed right now at the PME. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section after giving that a like and following me on Instagram. You too will be in a draw for 20 DK bucks. Tons of ways to go do this, just so you know. But yeah, Jordan Howard, 63% of the snaps. Miles Sanders, 29% of the snaps. Scott, 6% of the snaps. Corey Clement was placed on IR. There was no Darren Sproles with a quad injury in this game. I really thought, I bet the over on Miles Sanders catches, and I thought that was just going to be a certain lock at 2.5. And he ended up with 3. He hit that prop, but he hit that really early, and then they just stopped going to him. They were down this entire game. I get if they were up by 20, or if the roles were reversed and they had the lead that Minnesota had, then I would understand Jordan Howard 65%, 70% of the time. But if you're actively passing and you know you have to pass and you're trying to play hurry up, I don't understand why Miles Sanders isn't on the field here.
Yeah, and it's not like all the injuries are like the obvious reason why, right? Sproles and Clement, more pass catching backs that can get on the field there. But since Deshaun Jackson went out, and then when Alshon was injured earlier in the year, they were using Sanders more in the passing game, and he was getting his snaps directly bumped up because of that. He was being used in the slot. He was being used just coming out of the backfield. So in the one game where it seems like you need him the most, still no Deshaun Jackson down the field, all these backs out, it is kind of mind-boggling, and I'm sure that's something that they're going to kind of take and go with moving forward. Why was he only on the field 25% of the time or so?
Last note that I have from the games, from the Carolina-Tampa Bay game, which was just kind of hilarious to watch, but Shaq Barrett through 4 weeks was probably the defensive player of the year in football, and he's been pretty mediocre the last 2 weeks. Now, Tampa's run defense is still quite stout, but I think the teams are actually accounting for him now instead of just being like, Shaq Barrett, he's no good, and then they watch the game, feels like he's the best player in this game by far. He is just generating so much pressure for this defense, and he's really been kept to the side the past 2 weeks. So I don't know if it was a flash in the pan for him, and now teams are hip to what he's up to, or it was just a bad 2 games. It's going to be really hard to judge.
Yeah, I think coming into week 5, he was dealing with, they officially listed him as questionable, but he was like always expected to play in week 5. But he was nicked up a little bit. So maybe that has something to do with it if he's dealing with that. But yeah, I assume after he's up there in the league leader of sacks through 4 weeks or so that you game script around him a little bit. It's really tough though, because that whole defensive line is just stout. So we'll see if he continues to maybe just had a hot start and now he can kind of settle down and have a high quality year instead of a just record breaking year.
Let's go to the Power 5 teams in football right now. I got it as New England, still number 1. San Francisco, number 2. New Orleans, number 3. Seattle, number 4. And although Green Bay plays tonight, I'm going to pencil them in at number 5 right now. But I think Green Bay is closer to the teams that are on the outside looking at Kansas City. Got to bump them down a bit. Houston, Buffalo, Indy, Detroit. And that's really, are there other teams? Are Dallas and Philadelphia, maybe Minnesota, a part of this conversation?
Yeah, I would say Minnesota. So the top 5 is the exact same thing that I have here. Then I have KC. And then I have Carolina and Minnesota as other teams in my top 10 that I'm not sure exactly what to do with them, but I think they kind of push the top 10. And yeah, I'm high on the Bills. I still have them coming off the bye right now. I have the Bills at number 11, the Texans at number 10. And then I actually have Panthers at 7, Vikings at 8, Ravens at 9.
The problem with the Vikings is that they've just been, I guess the Eagles are a good team, is that they're good at home, but they're really poor against good teams outdoors on the road. And if they're not going to pile enough wins to play at home, like I can just see them dropping, even against like average teams on the road, that if the game script doesn't go perfectly for them, they seem to be in a world of trouble immediately.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the biggest thing is obviously just Kirk Cousins' ability to handle pressure and be effective. And you had the easiest matchup, sort of a cupcake matchup to do that this past weekend with the Eagles secondary. But it's good that he was able to take advantage of it. And just seeing that defense for Minnesota, probably their best performance of the year, at least in the first half of that game, something to take from. But yeah, it's a team that right now is sort of a fringy top 10 play for me. But yeah, the top 5, I would say the same for me. And I do agree with being a Packers fan myself, maybe a little bit more critical. I do agree that they're probably right there at that 5 spot, deservingly so. We'll see what happens tonight. But a team that I think there's a lot of just stench being just hidden up right now, especially last week, because Aaron Jones has been highly effective on the ground. And really just this pass rush, I think it's going to have to at least fall off a little bit. It's sort of exceeding expectations, in my opinion.
Let's talk about the week 7. Jeez, week 7, it's flying by. Waiver wire at running back. We'll start off with the injuries. First, Todd Gurley with his thigh obviously did not play. He's questionable for week 7. James Conner hurt his quad at the end of Sunday Night Football, didn't return, but Pittsburgh is on bye this week, hence why Benny Snell isn't quite as high up in the waiver wire rankings as maybe people would expect him to be. Then we have Rashad Penny. He missed week 6, questionable for week 7. Devin Singletary was on bye for the Bills, expected to make his return against the Dolphins this week. Chris Thompson and his foot exited the game. He's questionable for week 7. Corey Clement was placed on IR. Jalen Samuels out probably at least another 2 weeks, maybe more. Wayne Gallman should return from his concussion this week. They cut Jonathan Hilliman after the Thursday night game. It's been a mini bye for them. Saquon Barkley could play. Not quite sure if he will make his return in week 7, but at least it's on the table. We'll monitor him throughout the week. Rex Burkhead and Justin Jackson both missed week 6 as well. I'd expect Burkhead back. He seemed to be close to playing Thursday night. Again, they get the mini bye. Plus, I believe they play on Monday night this week. That's a Monday night game, right? Jets and Patriots?
Yes. Yep.
All right. So the actual waiver wire pickups then from the week. Where did I go with this nonsense here? I had it up on my screen. Anyway, Chase Edmonds is number 1. Put it that way. I wouldn't go busting the bank on him. You probably could have got him for relatively little last weekend. So you have that. Latavius Murray at number 2. With Kamara dealing with a knee and ankle injury, it just looks like it's going to be more Latavius Murray in the mix. Obviously not a go-to guy to go get. Malcolm Brown, Gus Edwards, Ito Smith, all handcuffs that you probably want to own and guys that still contribute on a weekly basis just a little bit. Mark Walton, Benny Snell, Rashad Penny, Chris Thompson, and Raheem Mostert. Colonel Mostert. Is there anyone else you would throw into that mix as potential pickups this week? Because no one's really leaping out to me.
Yeah, no one other than just more handcuffs. Like an Alexander Madison would probably be one of the just best running back spots if anything ever happened to Cook. And then maybe a Darrell Henderson Jr. if you're in a deeper league and are looking for what could potentially be closer to a 60-40, 50-50 split if Gurley misses again. But yeah, you hit on all of them. Edmonds is probably the best play that if he's on your waivers and you just have a spot and you want to dump your 5th string wide receiver, he's a nice add to stash.
Yeah, you mentioned Alexander Madison. I think the hell's his name now? Spacing here on a Monday morning, Sal. It's just going over my head. Raquel Armstead on the Jags. If anything was to happen to Leonard Fournette, it looks like he would assume most of that role. And Reggie Bonnefon, if anything, God forbid, happens to number 1 player Christian McCaffrey, that he would be in line to do a lot. How do you think that would work out? Assuming that Kyle Allen continues to start at least until Cam is completely healthy, and maybe even then, because they haven't made a decision on whether or not Cam will come back and assume his starting duty. I would think that he would, but hey, as long as Kyle Allen continues to win, he'll probably end up being the quarterback. But it does seem like Christian McCaffrey is doing a lot of this himself, that if it was anyone else, maybe they wouldn't be so successful.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually, from the Panthers game, I wrote notes that I know that Kyle Allen played well in the Arizona game, and a lot of that's just because of the up tempo, and then also Arizona's secondary and defense in general is terrible. But I thought that was the best game out of Kyle Allen, and it makes more sense that he's going to seem more comfortable as the weeks go on. But I thought he showed a lot more pocket presence, comfortability in the pocket, and just also throwing the ball deep and actually having some accuracy behind it. He had like a 99-yard drive in the first quarter, I believe, and it was pretty impressive, some of the throws that he was making. But I do 100% agree that this is a lot on just Christian McCaffrey's shoulders right now. And when teams have been able to kind of stop him, the Bucs for 3 out of 4 quarters, miraculously, that defense has been fantastic. We've seen some of the holes that this offense has. But yeah, I think that this is Cam Newton's job when he comes back. Kyle Allen has been improving. Maybe if he just starts to light it up these next, 1-2 weeks that he's going to be playing, there's more of a talk behind that. But I do think that overall the wins have been kind of on the back of this defense and Christian McCaffrey and not so much Kyle Allen. It's just Kyle Allen not making mistakes.
Then that's what we talked about as it's reflected in the MVP odds right now. That's why Christian McCaffrey is up there, because so much is falling on his shoulders to move this offense. And with defenses focusing solely on him, he's still able to overcome that. And then you get your DJ Moores and Curtis Samuels of the world. They just have easier tasks because no one's really paying attention at this point. I will say that if Devin Singletary is available on your waiver wire, I would have him number 1 over Chase Edmonds.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's the person that can make just the biggest splash right now. Mark Walton was kind of interesting, but at the end of the day, didn't play anywhere near enough snaps to be a priority. But he started the game, 11 touches, 75 yards, but it ended up being Drake, as expected, seeing far majority of the snaps in that one. But I agree that Singletary, unless we hear something on James Conner being just a really scary injury, then it's probably just Singletary at the top of that.
Yeah, if somehow Connor is out weeks, then Benny Snell becomes number 1 with Jalen Samuels out. But it doesn't, like, going on a bye, we're not going to hear too much information. And early reports is that it wasn't super serious, and having the bye should be enough to get James Conner back. Because James Conner looked incredible on Sunday night with the Chargers defense knowing what was coming every single time. The ability for him to get some really hard yards, and his just work in the passing game was a lot more than I thought it would be.
Yeah, and I was kind of waiting for more of that even just last year, because when he was using the passing game, he was effective and efficient. He just was never used in a bulk capacity. And the first 2 or 3 weeks of this season, he wasn't being used at all. And then we know the game last week, they just pretty much schemed 17 to 30 passes to the running backs. And you see it carry over. So I think that that's something they're going to prioritize. I mean, we know that this running back scheme is really good in Pittsburgh. You look back to Le'Veon Bell days. So I want to see that more moving forward for Connor, because, yeah, he's been fantastic at not only getting open in space when he's coming out of the backfield, but just making that first man miss. And we're seeing a bit of a burst out of Connor that we really haven't seen, at least from last year, that I haven't seen when he gets the ball in his hands in open space.
Yeah, he's looking more like he did in the first few weeks of last year, but he ended up getting hurt towards the end of last year. And even this season, he's been dealing with just myriad injuries that have been piling up. So maybe he was close to 100% health and he gets hurt again. Maybe there's just something we're going to have to deal with James Conner. But effective for fantasy purposes, which is exactly what we want. That Miami situation, Drake played 61% of the snaps and probably intentionally dropped that pass on the 2-point play at the end, just so the Dolphins could continue to lose. Walton played 42% of the snaps, and Balaj played 5. Balaj obviously scores the touchdown because, hey, when you play 5% of the snaps, you got to be the guy to score the touchdown. But Walton's usage in the passing game, because this passing game sucks so much, if you play in like a deeper PPR league, I could see running him out there as a flex during these bye weeks, or if you had to put up with injuries, as someone who could potentially squeak you like 10 points.
Yeah, and also, like, this is a little bit out there of a reach maybe, but if indeed that week 2 they came out after they made the trade, or they were about to make the trade with Minkah Fitzpatrick to the Steelers, they pretty much came out and reports came out that Kenyon Drake would be the next one up and somebody that they are actively just looking to shop if there's somebody who answers the phone. So it seems like Mark Walton would be the guy to get more of the workload just based off of this week and his skill set than Balaj, if indeed there was a Jay Ajayi, just middle of the season trade that you don't see coming, and Kenyon Drake gets shipped out of there. Mark Walton becomes a more than viable back to have in your roster.
The issue is it's still the Dolphins' offense.
Yep.
So
you're going to be dealing with 16 and 17 point totals and a lot of stalled drives. I was actually very I was kind of surprised to see Josh Rosen get pulled from that game. He was doing nothing, but just surprised after maybe 48 hours after the owner and the head coach come out and say Josh Rosen's our guy.
It was strange, but hey, they almost won the game, so good on them. Wide receivers, injuries, I got Josh Gordon. He's going to be questionable for week 7 after leaving Thursday night with that knee issue. Saturday will be the big practice for him. I think Philip Dorsett also sat. He should return this week. Emmanuel Sanders left the game on Sunday against the Titans, but he's expected to play Thursday night against the Chiefs, as is Sammy Watkins. He's trending towards returning Thursday night as well. He missed week 6 with his injury, so no more Byron Pringle. He can go back and live off his chip money instead of actually disappointing me in DraftKings lineups. Marquise Lee exited the game in week 7. He's questionable, or week 6 questionable for week 7. Amari Cooper in his quad injury. I don't know if he's going to play this week against the Eagles.
Yeah, no, the initial reports from Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk pretty much said that it's a really, so what it is it's not long-term in terms of an injury of it. It's just extremely, extremely painful to the point where even medicine's going to make it something that's just pain tolerance. And it seems like, it's trending that he might miss a week or two. And it's just something that I think there was like a quad bruise or something, but it's that painful. It doesn't sound as bad as it actually is, but kept him out the entire game with a helmet on the sidelines.
We saw T.Y. Hilton deal with sort of a similar type of injury a few weeks ago, and he ended up missing the game. He came close to playing, and then he ended up not. So Cooper could play this week. I would still say he's probably 70-30 to sit.
Yeah, I would say somewhere right around there as well. It seems like exactly what that is you lean more towards doubtful than actually probable.
Yeah, and that is the Sunday night game next week too. So if you're banking on Amari Cooper, it might be a bit tough because you might not know that information if he remains a game time decision. Hopefully this is cleared up by Friday and they're like, oh, he's practiced the last 2 days, he's fine, or he's out. Make other plans. That you don't want to have to be waiting on Amari Cooper, who tends to kill it at home and gets the Eagles secondary, who I hear not very good. At least that's what the game tape and stats would say going into it. So that overall impacts Dak as well. I mean, how much is Zeke going to be used in the passing game? I don't know. So it's going to be curious to see more injuries, though. We have Marquise Brown sat. He could be back next week. Sterling Shepard, we need to watch practice. N'Keal Harry for the Patriots. He hasn't played yet this season. He's eligible to return in week 9, but he has begun practicing. Do you think he's someone to actually stash? Because the way that you have to look at it is, and maybe it depends on the Gordon injury, that if Dorsett returns this week, he's going to end up being a starter with Edelman. Even if there's no Gordon, then you have Jacoby Myers. Do you think Harry can do enough? I know he's a first-round pick, but if Myers, Dorsett, and Gordon are all healthy, does he even see the field?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think he sees much of the field unless there is an injury or Dorsett continues to be hobbled. There's just so many guys on the outside that I don't think he'll be kind of just jumping over Philip Dorsett. They did have a lot of faith in him, and in the preseason and in camp, there's just so much good sentiment coming out about him. But I don't think he's going to make an impact, at least for fantasy playoffs or anything like that. What I would say is if you can just pick him up and it doesn't burn your waiver priority or cost any money for you, then pick him up because this is the most hype you might have around him, and throw him in as an extra piece of a trade deal if it makes somebody who's more interested in getting him kind of close that deal.
Yeah, if you play in a league with Patriots fans, then pick him up and trade him for Le'Veon Bell because he had a down game. Oh man, N'Keal Harry's so good. We picked him in the first round. He's on the Patriots. He's so good. I play in leagues with people like this. They're morons, so you can probably pull off this trade somehow. The other guys that missed the game this week, we had Christian Kirk, Kenny Stills, Rashad Perriman. Tyrell Williams was on bye, but he had missed the week before in London. Devontae Adams not expected to play on Monday night. In fact, he has been ruled out, so he's going to miss week 6. Taylor Gabriel on bye, but he had missed with a concussion the week before. Deshaun Jackson, Paris Campbell, not spotted at practice on Monday. They're coming off a bye week, but he did not play just before the bye. And A.J. Green has yet to play this season. I would say that Kirk, Stills, and Adams and Gabriel probably all have a good chance of playing in week 7. Not really sure about Tyrell Williams, though, just solely because they went out and they traded for Zay Jones to get themselves another receiver. Traveled with the team to London, then didn't end up playing. We're going to have to see practice reports before we have any idea about his status. But he has caught a touchdown in every game that he's played. Yeah,
exactly. I think that out of those names sound good. I think the one that I'm concerned about is actually Devontae Adams. He didn't even step on the practice field this week. And originally the sentiment came out that, it's fine. It's nothing bad. It's not as major as we thought. Surgery is not needed on this turf toe. But for the most part, turf toe lingers an entire really season for most players, and it'll at least knock you out for a month or so. So I do think that there is some concerns that Adams might miss 1 to 2 more weeks, only because he hasn't even been able to step onto the field. And out of some of the things that videotapes after practice or anything like that. He just said that he's just trying to get his shoes on and feel comfortable doing that right now.
So for the pickups at the waiver wire, I think this is the juiciest part of the waiver wire this week. Just like last week, I have Robbie Anderson at number 1. He is not above the 60% threshold, which I find kind of shocking. The Jets schedule opens up a lot here and gets quite easy down the stretch. So Robbie Anderson, number 1. Ditto with the Bills. I got John Brown at number 2. I think those two alone are by far the best 2 pickups. If you needed a receiver, I'd burn the number 1 waiver priority on them here unless you're really waiting out for a running back injury and someone to go get. But all the guys that we talked about who would benefit the most from an injury, you probably have at least one of them as a handcuff on your team right now. The Armsteads, the Madisons, those type of guys. Then I have Auden Tate, Jamison Crowder, Philip Dorsett, and Jacoby Myers. Dorsett will probably play. Myers might end up playing if Josh Gordon ends up sitting. So both those guys against the Jets, I think, are capable options. Then Devontae Parker, Darius Slayton, Sanu, Deontay Johnson going on to bye. Not sure the status of James Washington coming out of the bye, but he's still dealing with his shoulder injury. And I don't know about this offense in general, but I think it's those 2 guys, Tate and Crowder, Dorsett and Myers, are all playable this week. And then it's just, if you're in a deeper league and you need some bench padding, I have Zay Jones way down on this list, Duke Williams, Albert Wilson, those type of guys, but they're not priority ads.
Yeah, not priority ads. I agree completely with the guys on the top of that list. I'm not sure where Dante Pettis' percentages, if he's over 60% owned now or not, but
he's not.
I think I would like Dante Pettis. The obvious concern there is that just wide receivers in general aren't getting a ton of the market share, but slowly we've seen Pettis' snaps come back up to where they were last year when he was just going nuclear. That said, though, 72% of the snaps is good. It's just Kittle's the guy getting 30% of the volume out there in terms of the market share targets, and then everything else is split up between 5 guys. But if you are in some of that mid to deeper range, I think Pettis is good to kind of just stash on your bench for a week or 2 and see if he can continue this trend of seeing more field time and more targets. And then if you do have Amari and you need that late Sunday night ad or not, I'm not sure where it goes because Cobb should be back. So then I don't know if they push Tavon Austin to the outside and Cedric Wilson becomes nothing. I don't know if they activate Devin Smith. So it's really just watch the transactions that Dallas does, and that'll kind of tell you how Amari is trending.
Yeah, just play Michael Gallup. That's the move.
Exactly. Yeah. Play the number 1 right there.
Yeah. So at tight end, in terms of injury, Evan Ingram missed the week. He's going to try to play with his knee sprain in week 7. Chris Herndon pulled his hamstring in practice after getting lifted from the suspension list. He's questionable for week 7. Will Disley, the big one, looks like he tore his Achilles. He's probably going to be done for the season. 2L Luke Wilson. Or 2L in Wilson, Luke Wilson, not the actor, is now going to be the starting tight end for the Seattle Seahawks because they traded Nick Vannett to the Steelers, who the Steelers barely even use. Josh Oliver missed the week with his hamstring, which is notable that he could come back because Jeff Swaim got absolutely laid out against the Saints. He was basically unconscious on the field. So down O'Shaughnessy, down Swaim. Josh Oliver had some hype coming into the season. If he can get himself back to even 80% health, he can be on the field this week. Jordan Reed placed on IR finally. Vernon Davis missed the week again with a concussion. So things to watch out for. Tight end, not really much of Bruin. It's Herndon. If you need someone to go pick up right now, he'll eventually be back. I have Darren Fells at number 2, who continues to play a larger share of snaps every single week with the Texans, and he does seem to be the primary pass catcher over Akins. And one of the favorite targets right now is they've really shifted around their offense to make Will Fuller a centerpiece, using DeAndre Hopkins and basically the Kiki Cutie role of these short passes. But it seems to be throwing the opposition off depending on how they run this offense. So Everett, Hawkinson, Luke Wilson, Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle, Jimmy Graham. But Herndon and Fells are the 2 guys I think you want to go after.
Yeah, Herndon and Fells are the guys that stand out. If there's some reason in the world somebody dropped Hunter Henry because of his injury, go and get him as well. But I imagine he's not available in many spots. But Luke Wilson, I actually do think is worth it at a position that at tight end this year has just been so garbage if you don't have the top 6 or 7 guys. Luke Wilson is a guy that Seattle actually unlimited snaps this year, but they scheme for. Luke Wilson is more so than not put on the outside as a wide receiver than he is on the line as a blocker. He's not a great blocking tight end. So I expect we saw him play close to 70% of the snaps this week because of that Disley injury. I would expect him to be schemed for just like Disley was. We saw Disley playing close to 90% of the snaps once they traded away Nick Vannett to the Steelers. So I actually do like Luke Wilson. I have one waiver in for Luke Wilson right now.
Do you know who the top 10 fantasy tight ends are this season?
Oh my God, in order, I
You
have
don't
no
need to
idea,
go in
but
order. We'll play it like Stump the Schwab style, where
Let's do it.
you have a bank. There's 10 guys. If you hit the name, I'll tell you where they are.
Let's do it. Let's go with Travis Kelce,
Number 3,
Zach Ertz,
number 5,
Austin Hooper,
number 1,
Darren Waller,
number 7.
Darren Fells.
Darren Fells, no, not on that list. He is number 13.
Not. Oh, I thought he would be in there with all those touchdowns. Wow, I thought he would be in there with all those touchdowns. I know like the bottom of this is just going to end up being just backup tight ends right now. So George Kittle definitely has to be up there.
Yeah, George Kittle is number 8.
Mark Andrews.
Number 2.
Will Dissly probably up there.
Will Disley, number 6. Evan Ingram, who didn't play last week, is number 4. Greg Olson, number 9. Jason Witten, number 10. Delaney Walker, Gerald Everett, Fells, Jordan Atkins, James O'Shaughnessy. And then it's Hunter Henry.
Wow, yeah, I was actually gonna. I know he was out for so many weeks, but I was gonna say Hunter Henry might be like a top 15 tight end just from that 1 week alone.
The 1 week would actually, if he just had last night's game, that would make him tight end number 26 for the season.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's how bad the position is. So like anytime a guy who, and Dissly being a top 10 tight end to that point in the season, anytime a guy just goes out at all, picking up the backup is probably at least a decent move, because the guy that you most likely have, if it's not one of those top, 6, 7 guys, is probably not doing much for you this year. Like I'm stuck with OJ Howard in a couple of leagues and it's terrible.
Let's go to quarterback streams for week 7. I got 4 that I think that you can run through your lineups. Number 1, I actually have Daniel Jones at home against Arizona. This is going to be a high-paced game. I know Patrick Peterson is back, but it looks like, and this is kind of contingent on Shepard coming back, and not necessarily Barkley, but at least Gallman coming back, Evan Ingram playing. If not, I'd move him down. But I'm going to anticipate those guys playing minus Barkley for the moment in a great matchup with a high-paced game. Josh Allen, number 2 against Miami. Got to like that. Minshew at Cincinnati, and then Brissett at home versus Houston. Most of the other streamable guys just don't have good matchups this week. And frankly, that's a problem, because I have Jameis on a bunch of teams who, 6 turnovers seems bad, but not when you score 20 fantasy points anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That was just a brutal performance. I think that the list that you said for the streaming QBs is good. The way that I have it, I just put 5 guys just to have a top 5. I have Josh Allen, Daniel Jones, Minshew, Brissett, and then I put Joe Flacco to fill out a 5th, but you probably don't even need to get there.
I actually don't like Joe Flacco. He could end up throwing 3 touchdowns and get to his value pretty quickly, but just Kansas City is so beat up right now, and their run defense is so bad that I just anticipate this being a game a lot like Sunday, where if the Broncos are gonna have a chance in this game, and they should be able to generate pressure because everyone on the offensive line for Kansas City is beat up. Obviously, Mahomes might have high ankle sprain at this point. Like, he's not moving around well. He can't plant properly. It's affecting his throws. That this game could be a little bit closer if you get Mahomes on the move. And the only way to really beat, if you're a team who can't score in bunches like Houston and you're Denver, the only way to really make this a game is to shorten it as much as possible and run Royce Freeman and run Phillip Lindsay like 500 times. So I don't know how much Flacco is going to do. It's almost like a Marcus Mariota type of situation, who I guess we should talk about this. He got bench. I don't know if he's going to play or not next week, but Flacco could end up with one of those like 3 touchdown games for like 124 yards. I just expect them to be running the entire time.
Yeah, I agree. They were like pretty much right there in terms of how many rushing attempts last week compared to 28 Flacco attempts. And I think they had 26 running back carries on the ground. Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually, because you did have this Kansas City team now is dropping to the worst in the league from being second worst in the league coming into last week at defending the run. And they do have 2 defensive linemen, Xavier Williams done for the year, Chris Jones, who they rely on more for pressure, but he missed last week. And it doesn't seem like his timetable is a week away, or at least for a short week to come back. So yeah, Flacco mainly just filling out a top 5 there, but you're right. The ground game, and also from Denver, like Phillip Lindsay has just been absolutely fantastic on a per touch basis. I don't know why in last week still doesn't see over 50% of the snaps. I think they have to start getting him the ball more. Maybe it's just a durability issue, but from what I've seen, every time the guy touches the ball, it's a big to at least a positive play, compared to Royce Freeman, where it's 1 out of every 5, 6, 7 touches is something that's catches your eye.
Defenses you can pick up off the waiver wire for week 7. Did you know that the San Francisco 49ers defense was dropped basically en masse last week, so they're below the threshold, and now they get Washington. Yes, it is in Washington, but, I'll still take the 49ers in this spot. They're far and away the best defense. Hopefully in a competitive league, they're not available. Actually, hopefully for the viewers' sake that they are available, then you can go pick them up. If not, the Chiefs at number 2 at Denver on Thursday night, the Giants against Arizona, they still generate, middling pressure that Kyler will take some sacks, especially outdoors. The Lions and the Seahawks. Again, almost like quarterback, not a great week for streaming defenses. Generally, the good defenses that people own all have sort of smash matchups this week.
Yeah, it's just San Francisco at the top of that. I'm not too sure where. I assume people based off of maybe just name value still own Jacksonville against the Bengals.
They do
above that threshold, because there's not much. Like all the really good defenses, like Buffalo, going to be facing Miami. Maybe Green Bay because they generate pressure, but I imagine they're above that threshold versus Oakland. It's just a lot of bad defenses down there. But I'm surprised the 49ers dropped that much. Maybe teams and just people in general are starting to realize how good they are right now.
They are, but for whatever reason, people were terrified of the Rams last week, despite 2 offensive line injuries and San Francisco basically having a top 3 pass rush in the league. They were just like, nope, not doing it, and didn't even hold on to them, knowing they have Washington the following week, and they were just like, yeah, screw this, I'll go pick someone else up.
Yeah, that's the thing. It was just short-term thinking there. Yeah, it's I don't know. Whoever is going to reap the benefits of that, go and get your defense for the week. But for the most part, you're probably just streaming them.
Yeah, let's talk about the Monday night game then. We can talk about showdown plays, or we can even talk about some of the prop betting here. Right now, as it stands, the Lions at the Packers. The Packers are 3.5-point favorites. The game total is 45.5. Do you have a lean in this game? I'm going with the Packers. That was my pick on the pick show. I do think they can win this, but this opened at 6. It's down to 3.5. You would expect the Packers being such a public team that all the money is coming onto them, but it's like 50-50, and it was on the Lions a lot earlier in the week. It seemed like a lot of people really jumped at that 5.5 number. That stayed there for a bit, and then it's continuously dropped all throughout the week. That people really liking this Lions team. We haven't seen this Lions team play in a bit, so fresh in our minds. But I think this is the sort of team that the Packers can handle pretty easily, because not necessarily easily. Detroit can definitely win this game, but the Packers are so good defensively that I think it's going to be more of a stretch to think that the Lions move the ball particularly well against the Packers.
Yeah, so just from the jump, I probably lean Green Bay here, especially because of that line movement, and now I think it's actually favorable, even more of a lean. In general, for the game, I actually like the under. I have a bet in on the under right now. It came down, I think, a point from open, but last I saw, it's like you can get it at 46, some places 45.5. But yeah, I agree with you. I think this Packers secondary, they have the size at cornerback, especially with Kevin King, to match up with the size on the outside for Marvin Jones and Kenny Galladay. And I think the biggest piece for Detroit really is one, seeing if TJ Hawkinson expected to play, but actually does suit up there. I think they have a slight advantage there against Packers linebackers. But then the biggest piece is just Kerryon Johnson. If he's going to continue to play 3/4 of the snaps, 75%, his matchup against the Packers run defense, which when it has been targeted, has been vulnerable. Even last week, Ezekiel Elliott doesn't touch the ball a lot because they're down by so much, but he had 12 carries at 1.4, over 60 yards. So on a per touch basis, they're just getting gashed.
Well, one of the big things, too, especially as it pertains to Aaron Jones, like not having Davante Adams is clearly going to impact the passing game for the Packers, but no Mike Daniels on the Lions offensive line. And like he is their primary run stopper. And it would have been a revenge game for him as well. But I think that really benefits Aaron Jones and the ability for the Packers to extend some of these drives and milk a lot of time on the clock. So I do think that actually helps your undertake as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually a big piece of it. Mike Daniels, when he was on the Packers, paired with Kenny Clark, they were the 2 best run stoppers on that team. They still have Snacks Harrison for Detroit up front, but Mike Daniels is just a huge piece that they're going to miss. Doubtful for this game and a return back to Lambeau. So it does help Aaron Jones. Jamal Williams is trending towards playing. So just in general, the Packers without Davante Adams, like their number for this game, their number 1, 2, and 3 receivers, I would argue, are probably the worst in the league, with MVS being more of a deep threat than a chain mover. Geronimo Allison, just when they're putting Geronimo Allison in the slot, he's a lengthy receiver in the slot that it just does not work out. He's been terrible in the slot at getting separation. And then Jake Kumro on the other hash played nearly 70% of the snaps last week. He's been great in the preseason, but he's just been never able to get separation against just tier 1 cornerbacks, or at least starting cornerback play instead of third stringers from the preseason. So when that's what they're working with, I think it's just coming down to a lot more scheming Aaron Jones into the passing game to have a weapon there. And then I think you probably see a little bit more Jimmy Graham this week, if indeed it is a pass friendly or a neutral game script, instead of the Packers just being up by 3 touchdowns and not having to rely on it. So like earlier I mentioned, it was some stench that they might have been covering up last week because Aaron Jones was just that good and the defense was causing short fields. But if they're in a game where they have to pass the ball and actually rely on Aaron Rodgers and those receivers, that's where it can get a little bit scary. That's why I kind of lean to the under in that situation.
Let's talk some props. We tried to talk through the props last week, and I think we got on the right one, and then it just didn't come through. Sometimes that happens. You end up on the short end of the stick, and sometimes you make the wrong bet, and hey, it ends up coming through. So this stuff has a tendency to wash itself out. You just want to try to be on the right side of most of these things, and hopefully the luck falls in your favor as well. You mentioned Kerryon Johnson. I'm right now just looking at player rushing attempts for the game. I like these props more. It'd be like if you could try to predict targets for a player, that if you have a game flow in mind of how this is going to go, like I hit this big on Adrian Peterson yesterday. It's like they're favored in this game. They've said they want to run the ball with Peterson, and they dangled his over-under rush attempts at 15.5. So unless he didn't get hurt, then he was going to get that over, and he got it pretty quickly into the second half. So right now it's Kerryon Johnson over 17.5 carries, Aaron Jones over 15.5 carries, over under. Do either of those appeal to you?
Yeah, so for me, the one that appeals to me the most is probably Kerryon more so than Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, actually, that's a favorable spot, but with Jamal Williams back and all week in practice this week, they're saying that Jamal Williams has been looking absolutely fine, which after that injury, it's kind of crazy how these guys bounce back so quickly. But there's a chance that Jamal Williams can just come into this game and he can go back to playing, even with Jones playing well, 45-50% of the snaps, and push Aaron Jones back to a 13-14 carry day. The Packers have not been they've been very willing to do that. So, yeah, Kerryon is where I would lean the most. That's the best matchup right now for Detroit. Yeah,
and you have to think that this game stays close in order for that to hit. Like we've seen, Arizona, 16 carries. The following week against the Chargers at home, that was a close game, only 12 carries in that game. Then 20 against Philly, then 26 against Kansas City. They lost to Kansas City, but they end up beating Philly. But it seems like they want to be competitive with the better teams, run Kerryon Johnson as much as possible. It's a big number to cover, though, 17.5. I'm just looking right now. Maybe it's better to go at rushing yards. Rushing yards over under 72.5. Do you mind that?
I mean, I lean the over there, but I think I actually like the attempts more. But yeah, the Packers on a per touch base have been getting gashed up. So both of those numbers, like I would lean for the over on both of them.
Yeah, looking at Football Outsiders right now, Green Bay 5th in overall pass defense so far this year, 28th in rushing defense. And on the other side, when you have Detroit, 12th in pass defense, 14th in rush defense. The 15.5 for Aaron Jones is enticing, but I think you kind of hit it on it with Williams. Is there any receiver in this game you think you would look to? Like Kenny Golladay over under 4.5 receptions, but maybe Jair Alexander ends up on him, and maybe they're just easier completions at another point of the field. Like Marvin Jones over 3.5. TJ Hawkinson, 2.5 is probably pushing it for him at this point, even if we don't know if he's going to play yet or not. Aaron Jones, 3.5. Valdez-Scantling, 3.5. Allison, 3.5. None of those really leap out to me as something I want to be a part of.
No, they don't. I think Galladay's is interesting only because I would say if I had to just pick a side and bet on the side of which cornerback covers him, I would bet that it is actually Kevin King. You have Jair Alexander usually will guard, and it's probably not a shadow matchup either way, but for the majority of the game, Jair Alexander will usually guard the shorter cornerback just because Kevin King is taller. He's going to match up better with Kenny Golladay. Marvin Jones is actually 2 inches taller, or Marvin Jones is actually going to be the matchup that I would expect Jair Alexander to be on just due to size. He's a little bit shorter than Kenny Golladay, so the 4.5 catch is a little more enticing there. I guess, do they have a Jimmy Graham receptions prop?
Yeah, it's 3.5.
Yeah, that's tough. I would have said that. I would have liked it if it was at like 3, so you get a push there.
Yeah, 3.5 just seems like a bit much. I guess with Adams out, I know Mercedes Lewis is running a bunch of routes. There's no props on him outside of like first touchdown, but I probably don't even want to touch that. Maybe it's just a nice week to stay away. Maybe like what's over under sacks 4.5. Ugh, I don't even like that very much.
I think I'm going to look for that Jimmy Graham prop on my end or just reach out to people because I actually think I like that. Robert Tonyan's not going to play this week, third string tight end, but he was running about 10 routes a week as a backup tight end. Now that might directly just help Mercedes Lewis, who's been running like right around that same threshold of 10 to 12 routes a week as of late. But Jimmy Graham, I would expect to be, especially because last week you didn't see Jimmy Graham that heavily involved because they were up by so big, but he still caught 3 balls. If this is a game that they're not up 2 to 4 scores and Rodgers has to throw more than 28, 30 times in this game, I think Jimmy Graham is the one person that he trusts the most outside of maybe Aaron Jones out of the backfield. But when they get into the red zone, it's definitely Jimmy Graham that he's going to trust the most. So in a game that I would expect is more neutral script than a 2 to 3 touchdown difference like last week at Dallas, I think seeing 3 catches in that sort of a game is encouraging with a 3.5 total, and another tight end who's running out routes going to be out for this one.
Week 7 spreads, the early look here. The biggest spread of the week is the Buffalo Bills favored by 16.5 points at home against the Dolphins. I've had a rule where I don't like to pick the Bills to cover large spreads, but I don't know how Miami scores points on this defense.
Yeah, and I just have a thing where when Buffalo's at home, if they're ever an underdog at home, that's just a fantastic spot to take points. But when they're at home, they're just a completely different team. And now this year in general, they're a different team, it seems so far. But yeah, I saw that was the first thing that stands out as such a huge spread there. And I actually, if I had to lean somewhere, it would be lean Buffalo.
Yeah, even you could do Buffalo, and the over-under in this game is still only 39. Like, if you think that the Miami at best can score 10 points, it's not like the Bills are going to score 50. So they can cover this game and win, like, I don't know, 24-3, and both sides of it end up hitting. Like, you could probably even tease them down. You could tease the Bills down to -10 and tease the under up to 45.5, and that might be the move, like, just as initial looks at this week.
Yeah, I was exactly going to say that. I was going to say, is this a teaser move? I know it's not the magic numbers to use the teaser for, or that some people state it is, but it seems like a nice little teaser right there. Especially, I mean, there's just no way that, I don't think at least there's any way that that game just doesn't go over if you're going to be teasing it down at that point.
The Jets Monday night are 9.5 point dogs at home against the Patriots. That's interesting because
get it. Yep.
Darnold looked good enough at least on Sunday against a really banged up Cowboys team. How's he going to look against this Patriots defense?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know where you were going to go with that. I actually, like, that many points at home is always good for a team in a prime time spot. But when you think about public perception going into it, everybody just saw the game of the week, 4:00, how good Darnold looked against, and this offense looked in general against the Cowboys. So I do think now people kind of maybe forgetting a little bit New England playing on Thursday. I do think that this is a good spot to just get New England, obviously a team that is going to cover the most, or 60% or whatever it is over the long term. I actually like and lean New England in that one.
Yeah, I'm going to have to try to break that one down. Tune into the Week 7 spread pick show with Cust as he goes on about how the Jets are now the best team in the league. It should be kind of hilarious, especially coupled with the Chargers losing again, and Feinberg just going to be an absolute mess. He'll be crying the entire time. Let's discuss the Thursday night game just before we get out of here and talk about maybe some DraftKings Showdown potential plays and maybe how this game goes. We know Mahomes is banged up with this ankle injury. It does look like Sammy Watkins is going to play. From the other side of the ball, like I had mentioned earlier, that Emmanuel Sanders appears like he will be good to go for this Thursday night game after leaving against Tennessee in Week 6. So you'll have a full complement of players, basically. They might be not 100%, but they'll be on the field, it looks like at least. The Broncos are 3.5 point favorites at home. That just reeks of a trap line, doesn't it? Like, who's not betting Kansas City in this spot? Which worries me.
Wait, are the Broncos the favorite in this spot?
No, they're plus 3.5 at home. So the Chiefs are 3.5 point favorites on the short week on the road. But still, like, these two teams shouldn't be close to each other.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I actually personally think that Denver's defense gets the short end of the stick. But yeah, there's just so much negative sentiment going in on Kansas City right now as they're actually getting healthier because you can't get as hurt. So I do like this spot a little bit. But in terms of like just showdown and drafting plays, I love Phillip Lindsay as a play here against Kansas City.
Do you think that there is an opportunity, if this game is going to be close, like the spread indicates, that you could get away with using Lindsay and Freeman here, knowing that's what they're going to want to do? And over the last 2 weeks, Freeman has got the higher end of the touches and snaps. He's playing like 54% to Lindsay's 44%. And then just all of a sudden, like, you'll see like Devontae Booker pop up on the field every now and again. But I wouldn't be too concerned about that part of it. But knowing that you can be so successful running on the ground, up the middle against the Chiefs, that 2 running backs could be in play.
Yeah, I think it's in play. I think the only reason why it comes in tough or as being tough is because there's just so many weapons on Kansas City and probably guys that are naturally going to be cheaper for a showdown slate that expecting like some of those guys on that end to not put up points is difficult, but it is a tough matchup in terms of the defense for Denver at home. But yeah, I do think there's some weeks where I just set rules to like not have two running backs in a showdown slate together, but this wouldn't be one of those weeks. There's a real chance that, like you said, they try and just completely game script on the ground and both running backs see 12 to 15 touches each.
The one thing I have noticed from showdown slates every time Kansas City is involved is just use Tyreek Hill as your captain, because if anyone's going to break the slate, it's going to be him, and you're going to want those captains 1.5 points.
Yep. Yeah. I was going to say the exact same thing. It's like DeAndre Hopkins in prime time, and then it's like Tyreek Hill in prime time. It's not like, will he score a touchdown? Is it a multi-touchdown game? Is it a 3-touchdown game? Tyreek Hill in prime time is fantastic. I usually try to have like Kelsey lineups along with Tyreek Hill lineups whenever Kansas City's on the slate. That's probably what I'll end up doing in this one. But Tyreek Hill by far just the highest ceiling for a one-game slate in terms of variance. He by far is above everybody else.
Well, the issue in this game is going to be who do you end up taking at the cheap end? Because even like now that almost everyone is back for the Chiefs, they're all going to be priced up. Like all the running backs are kind of irrelevant at this point. Like Shady has been the best for like season-long fantasy. He's 26th in fantasy scoring. Both the Williams brothers are 41 and 42. Like 2 touches for Damian Williams. Like fortunately, one was a touchdown. I don't know what to make of this backfield. And if Mahomes is actually banged up, it could work of one way. You lean more on the running backs, but at the same time, with the offensive line banged up and Mahomes banged up, they don't have to give you as much credit in the passing game to open these huge lanes like we'd seen in the past. So I don't even know about the running game for the Chiefs here, that maybe you need to look at someone like, I don't know, if Sanders is going to play, but he's going to be banged up, maybe Deshaun Hamilton, maybe Noah Fant is guys.
Yeah, I was going to say Noah Fant, a guy who just stabilizing around his snap count. But if Sanders is banged up on a short week, that's a guy that I would probably go to. Seemed to be a guy who picked up some sort of production once Sanders went out there. But yeah, after that, it's we have to see sort of what these salaries will end up looking like. But Noah Fant's like the first guy who stood out to me for a cheaper end guy if you're just talking about position-wise and not just going down to a kicker or a defense or something along those lines.
Even looking at the snap counts from week 6 against the Titans, and maybe that game flow won't be indicative of how it will work Thursday night against the Chiefs, but at tight end, Heuerman actually played 52% of the snaps along with Fant playing 65. So maybe Heuerman's going to come in super cheap that maybe you can grease a touchdown out of him if you can have the savings, because like I mentioned, if you want to pay up for Tyreek Hill or you want to pay up for whoever it might be, all the expensive options in this game are going to be too expensive to pile all together. They're going to need someone else. Maybe you just turn to like Kansas City's kicker or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you have like Mahomes in your lineup and you have Tyreek in there for just, if that's the way you want to try and correlate it, having like that same team's kicker makes sense in terms of having some sort of correlation, extra point wise, or just in the ability to move the ball is going to lead to more field goal opportunities. I just always say, if you're interested in playing the kicker for the salary relief over some skill position players that surely probably have a higher ceiling than them if they do catch a touchdown, you just have to ask yourself, do you think they score 9 to 12 fantasy points? If they do, then you feel good about that game flow and you feel good about the way you're going with your lineup. So yeah, kickers are definitely in play. I usually correlate it if you're playing the quarterback with his same kicker.
Yeah, I tend not to, but again, you have to be so precise and get the perfect combination that maybe sometimes if you can jam in all the top studs, that's the way to end up doing it. Be curious to see how all of this plays out on Thursday night with the Chiefs at the Broncos. Sal Vetri, thanks for being on, man. It was a good time.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Pat. This is fun. Thank you. It starts the week off good, gets the process going for the week, and just really understanding what happened in a more concise viewpoint.
Yeah, well, now that we've talked through this, you got to let everyone know what you're up to all week and where they can watch and listen to you.
Yeah, so I'll have content out all week long on my YouTube channel. You just type in Sal Vetri, my name, on really any format. It's stripped and put onto all audio platforms. And then on Twitter, it's at Sal Vetri DFS. I'll be on the Awesomos Show on their YouTube channel and all their platforms on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays at 11 a.m. East Coast time.
All right, I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, where there is a giveaway that I talked about at the PME. If you want to get into a draw for 20 DK bucks, smash the like button for the episode. Leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Tell me what percentage of fab and how much fab you would use on a pickup this week and who that player would be. I'm curious to know who people are going after on the waiver wire. I think it'd be Robbie Anderson and John Brown, but frankly, in the more competitive leagues, I would guess they're probably already picked up ditto with Devin Singletary. So let me know who it is and how much fab that you're going to spend. Plus, you can always listen to the Pat Mayo Experience wherever you download podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, CastBox, TuneIn, wherever, iHeartRadio. Leave a 5-star review after subscribing and downloading, DraftKings handle, and say something nice about the show, and you'll be in a draw for 20 DK bucks as well. Plus, there's always bonus content on the audio feed that doesn't make it into the video, stuff that gets cut out of the video that's not live for all of the shows, just kind of appears on the audio feed. So you might want to go check that out. Always a good time for some extra content for them audio listeners out there. Anyway, I'm Pat Mayo. You can check out all my work on DKPlaybook.com. If you hit the description or comment section of this video, you will find the Listeners League link once it is available, and all the links to the pickup power rankings, which will be adjusted as injury news rolls in over the course of the next 2 days. All right, I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you all for watching. Good luck in Week 7. I'll see you next time.